Once again, welcome in everybody. We're going to get started in about 45 seconds or so. And if you like, you could just introduce yourself inside the chat. Let us know where you're joining from, what your role is, what you might be looking forward to out of this session. Hey, Nathan. Me admit, Nathan is in Calgary, in Alberta, Calgary, in Canada, teacher. Just want to hear what's out there. Awesome. Very good. Glad you're here, Nathan. Nathan, I did a presentation in Nova Scotia. So how far are you from Nova Scotia? Let me know. And then we have the name just says Ludwig C., an elementary music teacher from Lamar, Colorado. Wonderful to have you here. Oh, Nathan is actually there. I am from there. Okay, a 6-hour flight. Cool, cool. We have Shelby in the building. Hi, Shelby from Jacksonville, Florida, a high school history teacher. Thank you for being here. And as I'm looking at the waiting room, I am noting the time is 4:15. Yep, Halifax, absolutely right. I was there for the psychology in schools conference that they had. And met with their psychologist there. So it was an awesome session. Uh, Very cool. Okay, I am going to go ahead and get started because I believe in being prompt. We have a smaller group, and so I want us to ask questions, to be involved as best we can inside the chat as we go through a topic that is really near and dear to me, which is mental health, well-being of people, and I'll share a little bit about who I am and why this work is important to me. And then we're also going to add in a new element, which is why I'm sure you all are here. You all are intrigued with artificial intelligence, its use, and how it connects to AI. And so it's good to know you all's backgrounds. We have a nice mix of backgrounds here. And so I'll share my perspective and hopefully we can learn from one another if that's all right. I am Byron McClure. I am a school psychologist. I've been a school psychologist since 2010. Grew up in the DC, Maryland area. And so that is where I call home, which is near and dear to me as well. Um, I've been a practitioner inside of elementary, middle, high school, working with youth in alternative school settings. And then I spent the latter half of my career in Southeast DC, doing some really, really neat work. Got opportunity to lead some school transformation work uh, in Southeast DC. And my focus was leading a team that was focused on transforming the school culture and climate of the entire school. And what we found out was in order to make impact the lives of young people, we had to start with adults first. And so in this conversation, I want to pull elements just from my personal life growing up in the DMV, which is the DC, Maryland area. I want to pull in my experiences as a practitioner inside of the schools, working with youth mental health, working with kids from historically marginalized communities and who've had significant unmet needs, and then pulling in experiences of working with adults. And for this talk, I'm giving you the permission, and I know this is going to feel abnormal. It's going to go against what you might have been taught and conditioned to come to understand, but I'm going to ask you to be selfish just for the hour worth of time that we have. Why? Because as adults, we don't allow ourselves to really truly care for ourselves. And as you can see on the slides, deep at the core of this is how we as people can take care of ourselves, our well-being, and our mental wealth. And I use that word intentionally because I believe that at the end of the day, this is all we have, right? And if we're not in our right state of mind, what can you really have? And we'll talk about how to improve your mental wealth and how AI can help you to do that. All right, so let's keep rocking and rolling for the sake of time. I have quick learner objectives for those who like the instructional elements of it. Ultimately, what I want us to talk about is really envisioning a future where we utilize AI as a tool to help meet our needs, to improve outcomes for ourselves, and then for the people that you work with, and even those that you might consider, close to you, your loved ones as well. I want to quickly go through some of the limitations. We might look at, if we have time, some of the ethical considerations, and then really dive deep into how AI can benefit you in whatever role, whatever it is that you are doing. Now, I'm a school psychologist. Like I said, I've worked education settings. I did a little bit in private practice, and I recently created a company called School Psych AI. And the purpose of School Psych AI is to help psychologists who work in schools to do their jobs more efficiently. And the number one question I get is, will AI take my job? And I'm sure that that's not just for psychologists, that's for teachers, that's across industries. People are concerned and worried about AI replacing humans and taking our roles. And you might have attended some great sessions before this, but my perspective, my take on it is this. The biggest threat that we're facing right now, especially as it relates to job security, and then everything else can fall under that too. But for this, for job security, I believe stress and burnout. And you can replace your role if you're a clinician, if you're a teacher, if you're a special educator, whatever it is. Biggest, I believe, threat that we have is stress and burnout, not AI. What I want us to talk about is how can we start moving to the future where we can utilize AI as a tool to help reduce stress and burnout. And as a result, improving our overall well-being. So this session at its core is not necessarily about artificial intelligence. In fact, this conversation is about how we can reduce rates of stress, how we can reduce mental illness, and how we can improve our mental wealth. How can we improve overall well-being? How can we improve life satisfaction? These are things that I think we need to be talking about as well. All right. So, uh, I love generative art. Please put yes in the chat. You would know if you haven't used it. Let me know if you have used generative art. And when I say generative art, it's things to create images using AI. It might be Midjourney. It could be Dolly, which is now inside of Chat GPT. I got one no. I got a couple yeses. Another one that's out there is ideogram as well. So I'm giving you all different tools that you can use right now. And so this image was actually generated using generative art. And the funny thing about this, a big part of my work is working with individuals from historically marginalized communities. Another question I often get is there bias in AI? And y'all, it took me a lot to get diverse pictures and a lot of representation in this. And then look who is front and center. It's a man that's standing right front of the center right there, which, hey, um, but that's something to, one of the limitations of AI and how the data sets were trained is what you're going to get out. But I wanted to bring in this picture to show, a future that's bright, that's energizing. And for us as professionals, as adults in this work, how can we start to live a life that's meaningful, that's purposeful? And I want us to talk about what makes life worth living. And in our work, we don't examine this enough. Again, this is why I'm giving you all permission to be selfish because we don't reflect on these things. We don't analyze these things. So let's keep going for the sake of time. We're going to have a good conversation. So I see we have a good amount of teachers and educators here on this call right now. And so I'm going to bring you all a little bit of psychology, a little bit of well-being and fun to this conversation. So in 1998, there was this guy by the name of Dr. Martin Seligman. Please put yes if you've heard of Martin Seligman, or put no if you haven't heard of him. If you're not familiar with him, yes, I see a thumbs up. Very cool, very cool. Martin Seligman, he is an amazing person. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but he's considered to be a pioneer of the field of positive psychology. But that's current day. Back in 1998, the profession of psychology and mental health was really focused on curing mental illness, and it had a medical model. What that means is the focus was on how can we prevent illness? How can we treat illness? How can we look at what's wrong and how can we treat that from a lens of if you're going into a doctor's office, you're not necessarily like, or a better example is if you're going into an emergency room, they're just treating the symptoms, right? And they'll leave it up to, we can't get to the root cause. We got to fix the emergency right now. So what Seligman is saying in this address is we've got too complacent of just treating the symptoms. And what we have to do, we have to get to the root cause and really dig deep. And even better than that, what if we operated from a preventative lens, a prevention model? But it gets deeper than that. So with that framework, the American Psychological Association is like the entity around mental health, well-being, psychology, all of that, right? So imagine Martin Seligman in 1998, he's the president of the of APA. And the presidents, they always have to give a welcoming address. And so in his address, Seligman is standing up in a room. Just imagine thousands of psychologists, scientists, people who care deeply about the science of mental health. And so they're really austere type people. And here's what he says. He says, we have a major opportunity before us. And what he starts talking about is enlarging and really expanding the scope of the field of psychology. And he goes on to start saying that we need to reorient, we need to shift, we need to change the way how we've been going about practicing mental health and psychology and psychiatry in the United States of America. And here's what he says. He says that we need to better understand and begin building the most positive qualities of an individual. Now, remember, I just said, what have we been looking at? We're going to get there in a minute, right? And he says we have to look at the most positive qualities of an individual: optimism, courage, work ethic, future mindedness, interpersonal skill, the capacity for pleasure and insight, and social responsibility. What is he talking about? He goes on to say that as a field, understanding what makes life worth living, we don't have enough knowledge about it. As a field of scientists and practitioners and psychologists and people, you go see a psychologist to help you get through difficult times in life. And Seligman is telling a room full of psychologists and psychiatrists, we don't know what makes life worth living. Can you all imagine that? And can you imagine sitting in the audience and hearing the president of this association saying that? Okay, so he goes on to say this. If we look at going back to World War II, here's where he brings up the science of it. The psychology has become a science largely about healing. All right, that's cool. But here's the thing, it concentrates on repairing what's wrong, on damage within that disease model of how people function, of how we go about life. And he says that focus, that exclusive attention to pathology is doing us a disservice. In fact, he goes on to say it's causing us harm. Why? Because it's neglecting how people flourish. So again, remember this conversation, we're pulling in elements of AI, but at its core is how can we help people get to a place of flourishing and living a life worth living? How can we thrive? Let's keep going forward for the sake of time. He goes on to say that we forgot our larger mission, which is to do what? Making the lives of all people better. So as we continue moving through this, here's what I want to put forth to you all. Seligman goes on to say, we've misplaced our values, our norms. We don't know what makes life worth living. And so if you are here today, I am asking you this question. How are you making life better if you work with young people. You're mostly educators for the young people you serve. Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Well, Dr. McClure, Byron, you just said to be selfish. Now you're talking about other people. You're right. How are you making life better for you? And I crossed it out a little bit. It might be a little hard to see. So let's make it crystal clear what I'm talking about. How are you making life better for you? Think about it. We put other people first. We put everyone else's needs before our needs. How do you make time? Okay, Byron, I'm thinking about it, but what does this have to do with AI? Hold on to this question. We're going to come back here. I want to introduce AI. You're here at an AI conference, which I think is phenomenal. I'm blessed and grateful to be part of this. I think that technology, especially the use of AI, can really help us advance this work that we're doing. So I'm sure that you all have learned a lot from this conference already, especially basic things like what is AI. I'm going to share my definition of what it is so that we're all operating from a common language. And then we're going to get back to how are you making life better for you? But what is AI? I would love if you want to just comment inside the chat. What do you think AI is? If you're brand new, if you're experienced, just let me know. What do you think AI is? And no, it's not AI. If anybody's from Philly, I don't think we got anybody from. Oh yes, okay. I see
How
Ryan.
about Denver?
Oh, there we
He's,
go.
he's in Denver too.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yep. 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 So we'll give you all credit for that. Look, I'm told you I'm from the DMV, and so when Jordan came to play with us for a couple years, can I really take credit for that? But all right. No, AI is not Allen Iverson. As a psychologist, I liken AI to a computer brain, which I don't want to freak anybody out, but it does a really good job, this computer, of learning, of thinking, and then using the language, which is where we get these large language models from, to help make decisions in a manner that is close to humans. It's not humans. It's not replacing humans. But it can do things like, especially with models like ChatGPT 4, the ability to reason, to help problem solving, things like that. It can do pretty well. And with these models, they are learning over time. So, in a nutshell, that's what AI is. Depending on these models, I mentioned earlier about the different data sets. These models are trained on very large data sets. I believe ChatGPT, which is created by OpenAI, that model was trained on 540 gigabytes worth of data, very, very large data sets, which is a lot of information. And then there are different models out there that have all been trained in different data sets. Um, Based on because it is data, it looks at patterns and it looks at trends and then can use that to then be able to solve problems, to make predictions. It can reason, understand all those things that I mentioned as well. Now, here's what I believe. I believe that AI is a tool. I believe that it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, it can be neutral. It's a tool, and it's up to us of how we use it. I want to quickly go through some use cases of how AI has been used, and then look at how it's been used across industries. And then I want to make the connection of how AI can make your life uh, worth living. And so here are just some quick use cases of AI. In ways that we're already utilizing this technology as well. I think this is important because there's a lot of myths and misinformation on what AI is and what it's not. And believe it or not, you're most likely already using AI in your day-to-day life, and you might not even know it. One of the best illustrations is if you're shopping, if you're on Amazon, and then you're searching for something, you'll get recommendations. Well, that is through AI and different mechanisms so that you can see it can give you recommendations based on your trends, things such as fraud prevention, spam filters. My son plays video games, and so he talks about NPCs all the time. If you've gone to the airport, They're now using facial recognition inside of airports. That's part of that is artificial intelligence and then social media as well. Now, what does the use of AI look like across industries? Whether that's healthcare, finance. For us as educators, we care about education, mental health, but it's also been used in manufacturing and transportation, like I just said, in airports, in retail use, in autonomous vehicles. We all know about Tesla, but even more than Tesla, Toyota, Mercedes-Benz are utilizing this technology inside of their industries as well. And so I want to shift towards some of the benefits, and so that we can actually get into the actual benefits of AI for mental health and well-being. And I want to share how AI has actually been used for good and give some real examples of that. There was this study that came out in 2023 from Zhang and colleagues that showed the use of AI has been very helpful already with diagnosing very serious illnesses such as cancer and detecting them at early indicators, which is a very powerful way to use artificial intelligence. There's a platform, a software called Escape, which can predict new viral variants and diseases that are out there. Again, these are emerging technologies that can be used for good. And then the other one I wanted to share coming out of Mount Sinai, some research was done that used learning-based algorithms to predict the development of different diseases. And so there's a number of ways that we're already using AI, then especially across industries, and even in research where the use of this technology is already showing positive benefits. And then I thought this one was funny. All the images that I use um, are generative AI art, and I thought this one was funny. But AI is being used. If you can think of a pageant, they asked the pageant contestant, what do you want to do or whatever they ask, and they say to end world hunger. Well, AI is doing that. AI has been used to analyze millions of different data points to help predict and determine based off of trends and analysis to determine the ideal crop. And they can detect uh, different crops. They can detect if there's famines. They can make sure that they're diverting resources, which is a very powerful way to use AI in the agriculture field, which is really, really cool. Okay, like that's great. We get the benefits. We see how it's working across industries. But you told me to be selfish. So, okay, Dr. McClure, how can I make life better for me using AI? Okay, so here's three ways to leverage AI that you have to have a fundamental knowledge and understanding of. And then I'm going to shift towards actual strategies using this Inspire framework that I came up with and give you practical tools and strategies that you can start right away. So the three fundamental things is understanding there are very real limitations of AI. We have to understand a big benefit of AI is outsourcing tasks that we just shouldn't be doing, that we need to automate. And then understanding the ethical considerations around the responsible use of AI. I want to quickly go through what some of the limitations are, and please feel free because you might have already covered this or be familiar. What are some limitations of AI based off of what you know or what you've experienced as well? I'll share some of the limitations. One of the biggest limitations for me is that these models can hallucinate. And if you're not familiar with hallucinations, essentially what that means is it doesn't get it right all the time. You might be talking about one topic and then it just gets lost in translation, right? And it's like, no, we were talking about this. You didn't get that right. Or it can make up if you're asking for APA citations, it can completely make it up and get it wrong. It's like, wait a minute, this is not real. That citation is not real. And then I kind of mentioned it earlier. One of the limitations is how these data sets, they're very large data sets. How have these data sets been trained? What data? Who benefits from the data? And who's been left out in the data? If you're asking for certain images, which images come up? Who's represented? Who's not represented? And these are just limitations. It's an emerging technology, and we have to take these things into consideration. The next limitation is really understanding tasks that can be outsourced. Like, what can we automate? What are things that, as humans, like we can use this technology to just do life more efficiently? Things like writing emails, drafting interventions, visualizing ideas, paraphrasing, rephrasing, so on and so forth. And then I want to give you all, I created a AI ethical task force. And this task force, we came up with ethical guidelines for the responsible use of AI. And if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the ethical considerations, and I'll provide a link so that you all can access it as well. But these guiding principles are really helpful just in general, and it looks at fairness, looks at reliability and safety, inclusiveness, transparency, accountability, privacy, and security, which are all important. Okay, so now I want to shift into, we understand the limitations, we understand benefits, we get how to leverage AI. But what does this have to do with me? How can I make AI, how can I use AI to make my life better and make it worth living? And a big part of this is, again, giving yourself the permission to invest in yourself and start with you. Okay. How can we do that? And I want to put forth this framework that I've been using in the work that I do called Inspire. And it's a strength-based framework to begin really investing in yourself. And so it's a mix of, back to Martin Seligman, this PERMA model that he created for well-being, and mixing that well-being model with AI. And so we're going to go through this model of well-being. Then I'm going to give practical strategies along the way as well. And so Inspire, what is Inspire? What does Inspire stand for? So the first part is identifying your strengths and your abilities. The next part is nurturing potential, growth, and goals. Then the S is strengthening relationships and social connections, promoting explicit skill development, instilling a supportive environment, resting, which is so crucial and important, re-energizing, and then embracing a holistic healing centered approach. Okay, I want to get into the strategy. So we'll start with the I, identifying your strengths and abilities. Back to Seligman's talk in 1998, he says that the foundation of what we should start doing is really utilizing this strength-based philosophy, this strength-based approach. And I use this model. I have a book called Hacking Deficit Thinking. And in the book, I talk about this process of naming, knowing, and using your strengths. Let me know inside the chat if anyone has taken a strength-based assessment before. You might have taken things like the Enneagram or the VIA character strengths. One of my favorite is the Clifton Strength Finders. And the Clifton Strength Finders is a strength-based assessment, and it'll give you your top 5 strengths. And I think that everybody should be able to know your top 5 strengths. Are you able to name your top 5 strengths right now? If I were to ask you, name your top 5 strengths right now, what are your top 5 strengths? Can you name them? Well, with the Clifton Strength Finders, when you take this assessment, it'll really help you to be able to name, know, and then start using your strengths. As an example, I take the Clifton Strength Finders every year, and it helps me to be able to name my strengths. Then once I name my strengths, I write them down. And these are my top 5 strengths: maximizer, ideation, futuristic, focus, and achiever. So how can I take this and then build in AI around it? And so here's how you can use AI to help you identify your strengths and your abilities. And this video, it might be a little bit hard to see, but in this video, what's it? Let's see if it's playing here. If I click play. Okay, and I have the link here. So what I'll do, I'll put inside the chat for you all, so that you all can watch. In the platform that I have, my platform, like I said, is called School Psych AI. It's a free platform that you can use. There is a premium offering, but you can use it free. You could do the same thing in Chat GPT as well. But what it does is you can take your top five strengths, and in the example that I did, I gave it my top five strengths, and then I told it to actually help me understand. And it came up with the definition of what those five strengths were, which was super helpful and beneficial because now not only can I name them, but I can start to understand what those strengths are. So that's a great way to use AI to really help you understand your strengths a little bit better. All right, let's keep going. So the next thing is nurturing, cultivating your potential, your growth, and goals. How can you do this? By doing things such as taking courses. You're here during this professional development opportunity, reading books. That has become my thing. I'm reading, reading, reading. If you have any good book recommendations, drop them inside the chat. One of my favorite books that I've read here recently is called Essentialism. Hands down, one of the best books that I've read. I'm also going to start reading it again. So that's a great recommendation. And then the one that I want to call out and talk to about what I want to talk to you all about now is studying your strengths. And I have another example of a video that I am going to drop inside the chat. And if you watch that video, it walks you through how to create, how you can actually study your strengths. And what I did in this video, I took the same five strengths that I have. Then I gave it the prompt. I told it to write. I think this is the one where I had it to write an action plan for me based off of my five strengths. And I told it to give me a 5-day action plan that I can use to learn about my strengths every day. And then give me a goal where I can put my strengths in action. And watch that video, copy that prompt, and then put it in action. That is a powerful way to use AI to help you name and then start to really study your strengths so that you can really cultivate your strengths, your potential, and then be able to grow. Tom Rath, he does a lot of work on personal development and strengths, and he's just a really awesome leader in this space. Here's what he says. He says, across the board, having the opportunity to develop our strengths is more important to our success than our role, our title, or even our pay. And so we can use AI to help us develop the strengths that we have and then actually put our strengths into action. So I'll pause here before I go on to the next one and see if there's anything coming through the chat. Let me know if you all have any questions or comments about anything that I've gone through so far. All right. Please continue to use the chat if you have any questions or anything. If not, let's keep going. So the next part is strengthening relationships and social connections. And in this example, asking for help is a big, big one that I have. But how can we use AI to strengthen relationships and social connections? Here's a really cool a feature app that's out there. It's called Test by X2 AI. Let me know if you all have heard of this as well. Again, all of these links, I'm going to put all of these links so that you all have access to them and make sure that they're on my site so that you all have access to it. But with Test by X2 AI, what you can do is design to essentially be a psychological support chatbot. And what this does is mental health professionals and clinicians and adults at large can use this to connect, share insights, and seek advice from their peers. And this is just a really neat example of how to utilize artificial intelligence. When I worked in Southeast DC, I think the name of the company was called Mind Up, but it was a similar functionality for students and for young people. And their idea was to leverage these artificial intelligence, these chatbots, because students would be more likely to talk to someone, and they saw it as a way to destigmatize, really the stigma around mental health. and well-being. So I just thought this is a great way to really reduce the stigma and for people to have someone to have a conversation with. Again, there are ethical considerations, there are limitations to this that I think people really need to be aware of, right? Because if we're talking about strengthening relationships, strengthening social connections, if you're only engaging with a chat bot, then it's kind of counterintuitive. However, some of these features, and I think I'm going to talk about one here in a bit. Not only is it a chat bot, but it also has a human coaching mechanism built into it as well. And we'll talk about that here in a bit too. Okay. Now, the P in Aspire is on promoting explicit skill development and self-efficacy. What this looks like, we talked about your strengths. How are you putting your strengths into action, right? And I call this deploying your skills or deploying your strengths because it's one thing to be able to name them. It's one thing to be able to know them and understand. If you don't do anything with it, it's kind of pointless, right? So you have to put it into action. And even better, you have to be able to deploy them when the situation calls for it. But how can you do that? And back to AI, if you know, practice, practice, practice. We have to practice putting these things into action. So, how can we do that? How can AI help us with explicit skill development? There is this really neat tool. I just heard about this one not too long ago, and it's called Osmosis. And what this one is for personalized learning experiences, which is really cool. And based on the profile that you create, it tailors content for you. And this one is it's really for mental health practitioners and educators, and they say on the website for lifelong learners. So I would say I'm not getting affiliate kickbacks or anything from any of them. I just think it's really cool ways to use AI to improve well-being. Take a look at it. Another really good one is LinkedIn. LinkedIn, they have these learning courses, which are awesome ways to promote skill development. In fact, I took an AI course on large language models offered through LinkedIn and Microsoft, and it was really good. So has anyone taken any of the LinkedIn courses? They are really, really good. But Osmosis does something similar with their personalized learning platform. Um, for those mental health practitioners who might listen to the recording, or if you're here, it can help you with development of explicit therapeutic skills, which could also be good for teachers, general educators, or really anyone on using skills such as active listening, allowing silence, skills that are just good to get along with people, which are I find them to be pretty helpful as well. And then the I is instilling a supportive environment. And for this, what I mean by instilling a supportive environment, in my work in DC, a big part of my work was culture and climate. And how can we create the conditions that promote success? How can we create psychologically safe spaces to where it's conducive to learning? That's super important, and I don't think we give enough consideration to that. And so as individuals, as people, how can we create environments where we can thrive, right? Because if you come home and it's stressful, it's yelling, it's chaos, it's violence, it's not conducive to peace, then your mental well-being is going to be hard to really thrive, which is why we have to create a supportive environment. How do we do that? There's a number of ways. One of my favorite ways is creating a consistent routine, which is just so important. In DC, I started doing a lot of trauma-centered work, and then I moved to healing-centered work. But in that, um, whether it was trauma-centered or healing-centered, one of the first things that we did is how can we establish clear norms, values, and predictable routines? That was important because when there's chaos, you don't know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. And I know as teachers and educators, you all might be able to connect to that and understand that. So imagine that's your home situation, where you live, right? Even professionally where you work, it's hard to thrive in that type of setting. So in spaces that you control, it's imperative to create routines that are consistent, that are predictable. Um, the other one before I share in AI is go where you want it, right? Like that's important. I don't think we need to stick around in places where you're not valued, where your thoughts and opinions aren't respected, and where you don't feel like you're contributing. So go where you want it. And that's not just professionally, that's in everything. So, how can we use AI to help us instill a supportive environment? There's this really neat app that's called Fabulous. It's pretty fabulous. And in this app, I like it because it includes a coaching library that you have on demand access and you have availability there. The other thing is with this, it helps you to create and then sustain daily routines. Uh, for me, I never was one of those people who had like organized calendars, but now that's me. It's color coded. Yes, if there's anybody else who has like organization like that, let me know. But with this app, it kind of does a similar thing, and it gives you those reminders based on if you are doing meal prep, if you need support with studying, if you have responsibilities and tasks. It gives you that those features to really help you stay on track with things as well. And why does this matter? Again, because it's giving you the structure that you need, the predictability that you need to help you create that supportive environment, which I think is super important. And then the R is rest, y'all. Rest, rest, rest. And now I'm talking to myself, right? Because that's a hard one for me. And the book Essentialism that I recommended, I'm telling y'all, y'all have to read that book. It talks about making the time to think. Like, when do you stop? When do you give yourself the space to think? So often we don't do that. So often we don't even give ourselves the permission to take time to even just stop, let alone think. And again, I'm speaking to myself. It's very difficult to do that. I share some strategies here on reflecting, getting in your zone so that you can re-energize yourself. But for us, how can we make the time to intentionally pause and then rest? How many of us are getting 6 to 8 hours of rest a night? Look, y'all, I have a 11-year-old, a 8-year-old, and a 2-year-old. I know. Yeah, it's tough. And with the 2-year-old, like his sleep schedule is all over the place, which means my sleep schedule is all over the place. But as best we can, as best you can, making sure that you're getting that 6 to 8 hours of rest as you can. And then the app that I have here, how we can pull in AI, how we can pull in AI is Headspace, and some of you might be familiar with Headspace and this tool. Um, and in this one, again, you all might be familiar with it, but what it does is it also helps you to sustain routines that you have. It gives you reminders, it gives you playlists and things that are also really helpful as well. And then the last one that we have is exercise, taking care of your body, whether you're spiritual, if it's mental, if mindfulness, whatever it is, making sure that you are taking care of your physical body. Um, I was in a habit of walking. When I transitioned out of the public school system, again, I was in the public school system for 10 years. And then when I did the central office work, the school transformation work, I was between buildings, but I was walking a lot. And then in the evenings, I would make times to walk. But now that I transitioned and I'm working remotely, sitting at a desk for a large part of the day. And so I have my Apple Watch right here and it's charging right now. But how are we using wearables as AI to help us to get up, to get moving and things as well? And someone says, let me know, Sanaya, let me know if I said that correctly. A chat bot for students would be huge. So many students suffer from anxiety, depression, but don't want to talk to anyone about it. Do you see a robust solution being implemented broadly that will be available to teens similar to what you described for a group of students in DC? Yeah, so I think it was called Mind Up. I gotta go back and find the name of it. But it was a really, really cool app. In fact, in the school transformation work that I did, I brought in a big part of that was getting student voice. And so I had a student experience group of about 15, 20 kids. And I had different partnerships with them. And so let's just call it Mind Up. I think it's Mind Up. Can somebody Google that and let me know Mind Up DCA? But essentially, it was an app where kids could text this number. They would text the number and they would say, hey, like I'm struggling. It's confidential, supposed to be compliant, all of these things. And so our kids, my group, provided feedback on it. And we did that as a way to reduce stress, reduce anxiety. Mental health was a big, big need inside of our school. We didn't have adequate mental health supports. And so it was a way to address some of those disparities and also giving kids an outlet. And so our kids actually thought it was pretty beneficial. That was 3 years ago now. And so I know that there are some other ones that are emerging. I met a founder when I was in Chicago at a conference 2 years ago, and he has a platform, but he's overseas and he was trying to get into the States. I know that that tech is emerging, but again, there's limitations and considerations. How do you ensure if a young person says like, hey, I'm having, thoughts about self-harm and you're talking to a chatbot, what mechanisms are in place to ensure that person is connected with a human being who can also provide help? But at the core, I think that it can have benefits too, which is why I was super excited with the group Mind Up or whatever their name was, that they were attempting to do something like that as well. Um, as far as that being implemented broadly, uh, I think if they can work through some of those barriers and limitations, absolutely. I think this is the world that we're moving towards as well. Um, Especially in places where mental health is, there's the stigma that's attached to it. And we have, especially in my work, like I look at what are the barriers and what are some of the accessibility issues, and whether we like it or not, like most people have access to a phone. And if I can bring mental health supports to a phone and make it more accessible, then that's great. Another really good idea that I think someone on this call, y'all, we should do this, is making a AI generated app that if you need help, whether you're a young person or for us as adults, it connects you with links and resources right there on the spot. So you could say, hey, I'm a 45-year-old white female who is struggling with stress. Um, can you connect me with resources? And then this chat bot will give you all of these resources in your area, teletherapy options, and then can even set an appointment. All right, this is recorded, right? Somebody, y'all take this idea. We could do some things with that idea, but yes. All right. And then as we start to bring this one to a close, there are some new emerging technology. Let me know if you all have heard of this app. It's a humane AI and it's a pin that you wear. It's a wearable technology. And this one is it seems promising. It's also seeming a little creepy because it's getting into like really tracking what you're doing. But just if you're familiar with ChatGPT, you're asking ChatGPT for help, for ideas, for recommendations. Well, now with this wearable, if it's in your lapel, you just talk into it and you can ask for feedback and things right there on the spot. And some of the mechanisms that it will have in the future are things similar to a wearable watch, right, where you can track your workout regimens, your stress levels. At some point, they're talking about being able to measure your blood glucose levels, your fitness levels, and things, which would be really cool. Another one that's very similar to that is called Spire Health Tag, which I thought was pretty neat as well. And this is it's really stems out of the health world, but it's for monitoring your health. And what it does is it attaches to your clothes, similar to the lapel pin from Humane. But this one is kind of interesting. They said if you have like 15 to 20 outfits, you just put one on the outfits that you wear most frequently and just forget about it. I was like, well, what if you wash it? Said that it's machine washable, it can dry. And so if you're wearing the same 15 to 20, undergarments, just put it there and then it'll track all your levels. Again, limitations, I know, but it's tracking your stress levels, your levels of sleep, data tracking, your different things. So it seems promising as a way to be able to really see what's going on with your health, to keep track of it. And then what's super important here is once you can identify, gaps in, your stress levels or sleep, it's actually doing something with it, right? So once you have that information, these technologies should be used to take action. And I think that's one of the more important things that we're talking about here is how can we leverage this technology that's here, it's emerging. There are some limitations, but how can we really leverage this to take action, to get back to what Seligman was talking about, and to live a life that is meaningful? And so, as I start to come to a close, I really want us to not just look at technology, but to look at how we're showing up in the world and how can we truly invest in ourselves and our mental health and our mental wealth. And I have this quote: invest in yourself and see the returns come pouring again. Investing in yourself is the most important investment you'll ever make. And it's the surest path to living a meaningful life. And I'll just leave you with I implore each of you to go out and live the life that you deserve, like, because we all deserve that. And I challenge you to find one way. What's one way? And we went through the entire Inspire framework that you can leave fear and leverage AI to help you live a life that is meaningful. I'll pause here for questions, comments, or reflections on any of the material that was covered. And I also love to hear if there's any way that you all are already using AI in your daily lives to make your life more meaningful.
Byron, thanks so much for the presentation. Really good stuff, really thorough, looked great.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the time you put into this. It's clearly way more than an AI could have done. Um, I think one thing that I find a lot of benefit from is just like stupid administrative tasks that like um, I've had to run some like through some data and or like cleaning up spreadsheets or something like that, and just being able to put it in there and or find some low level insights that like I could do, but just takes time.
Mhm.
Um, I find just like when I can outsource some of the menial tasks that I know are going to be time consuming and kind of like drain my battery, and then I can focus on the things that are uh more like life giving or just like um just like actually using my brain, the best parts of my brain and what I've learned to do well. That's where I end up feeling like, oh man, that was a great use of a tool.
Man.
So sounds like, yeah,
Yes.
it's grand covered.
Yes, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you're absolutely right. Why I wanted to make sure that this slide right here was included, because there are things to where, it's these rote tasks. We're just doing them over and over. They become monotonous. And it's like, look, okay, I know if I didn't have to do these things, I could be using more brain power on things that give me life, that give me meaning, that bring joy to what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so at the core, using this technology to automate these things, right?
Yeah.
And look at Google. Google, I don't know if you all have updated your Gmails lately, but they're integrating a lot of AI into what they're doing and into their workflows. Same with Microsoft, same with a lot of our workforce tools that we're using in our productivity tools. So yeah, absolutely right. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions, anything that might be resonating with you? And if
I have one more
Sanaya,
question if we have a second.
Yeah.
yes,
I was
please.
just wondering, are there any discussions about using AI to give some sort of assessment so teachers can maybe see early warning signs and refer a student to go see a guidance counselor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, just to have that conversation? Because very often, the teachers are the ones who have the daily contact with the students. And maybe there are some AI tools that could help catch some of the early warning signs and help facilitate that initial conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. What was your name?
Senior.
Thenya? Yes, great question. That technology exists in the healthcare system, and I don't know if I included a slide on that, or if I went into depth, but the healthcare system is already on that, and utilizing these early warning indicators, to make predictions. Now, in education, I see where you're going, and if it's used correctly, it could be great. What we have to be cautious of, and I did a lot of my work has focused on disproportionality, which students are being referred to special education, which students are disproportionately disciplined and placed out of school, which kids, I mean, which kids are referred to gifted classes, which ones aren't. And if we're using AI, again, because it's based off of data sets and we're looking at data that's biased, then if we're using these as warning indicators, like, is there going to be bias in decisions that are made? And so, while there can be massive benefits of that, it has to be done with consideration to make sure that, we're not continuing to perpetuate, disproportionate outcomes. I know I work with uh, when I work with Seven Mindsets, which is a company, they acquired a company called XL Labs. XL Labs was an assessment platform, or is an assessment platform that looks at just culture climate data. And it's a school-wide survey. And I'm thinking of what you said and looking at some of the results of those type of surveys, then using AI as early warning indicators to get help. I'm thinking of psychologists who work in school settings using universal screeners. Okay, now the juices are flowing, and utilizing universal screeners as a way to, to actually be proactive, and then make sure that kids are getting filtered to tiered levels of support, um, early in advance. Looking at instructional tools, right? How can we utilize early warning indicators based off of technology to funnel kids to support? So those are ways that we can. I think it's emerging, and I think that there's a market if you have an entrepreneurial spirit to make these come, and there's a lot of money out there to make these things happen. So Great question. We should talk more. Here's my contact information.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate you answering my questions. Sorry for
Yeah,
bombarding you with all of them and monopolizing the questions a bit.
no, it was a great question.
Good stuff. We're at the end. Dr. McClure, Byron, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your wisdom and the work you do. And I'm watching closely on TikTok, following your journey, and I can't wait to see what happens with School Psych AI.
Awesome. Thank you all once again for having me. Take care, everyone.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you very much.